The hunger in her eyes was more desperate than the dust storm gathering on the horizon, as Delilah Morgan slipped the small loaf of bread beneath her tattered shawl. She hadn't eaten in 3 days, and the bustling market of Silvercreek, Colorado in the summer of 1876 offered too much temptation for a woman with empty pockets and an emptier stomach. Wyatt Daniels noticed her from across the street, his keen blue eyes catching the swift movement of her hand as he leaned against the hitching post outside the general store. At 26, he'd spent 8 years working cattle drives and had recently taken a job at the Thompson ranch outside town. He'd seen plenty of thieves in his day, but something about this one, the way her shoulders hunched with what looked like shame rather than cunning, made him pause before calling out. The shopkeeper's angry voice rose above the normal din of the market. "Hey, you there, woman, stop right there." Delilah froze, her thin frame suddenly rigid with fear. She was 22, but years of hardship had weathered her face beyond her age. The shopkeeper, a portly man named Frank Miller, was already marching toward her with a scowl deepening the lines of his face. "I saw what you did, you thieving little—" "There you are, darlin'," Wyatt interrupted, stepping smoothly between them. His voice carried easily across the street as he approached with long strides. "I've been looking all over for you." Delilah's eyes widened, confusion evident in her dirt-smudged face. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy braid, wisps escaping to frame hollowed cheeks. "Sir, this woman just stole bread from my stall," Miller insisted, his face reddening with indignation. Wyatt reached into his pocket and pulled out a few coins. "My apologies, Mr. Miller. I told my friend here that I'd pay for her purchases, but it seems there was a misunderstanding." He pressed the money into the shopkeeper's palm. "This should cover the bread and then some." Miller counted the coins, his expression softening slightly at the generous amount. "Well, I suppose if you're paying—" "I am," Wyatt confirmed, his hat tipped low over his eyes. He turned to Delilah, who stood frozen in place, the bread still clutched against her side beneath the shawl. "Take more," he said quietly, nodding toward the stall. "Whatever you need, it's paid for." Delilah stared at him, suspicion and hunger warring in her gaze. "Why would you do that?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from thirst. "Everyone needs help sometimes," Wyatt replied simply. Then, louder for the benefit of onlookers, "Now pick out what else you want and we'll be on our way." With trembling hands, Delilah selected another loaf and a small wheel of cheese. Miller wrapped them grudgingly and handed them over, his mood somewhat improved by the extra coin in his till. "Thank you," she murmured to Wyatt as they walked away from the stall, her eyes downcast. "You got somewhere to stay?" he asked, keeping his voice casual. She shook her head slightly. "I just arrived on yesterday's stage from Denver. Any family here?" Another shake of her head. The silence between them stretched as they reached the edge of the market. "I don't take charity," she finally said, her chin lifting with what pride she had left. "And I don't take other offers either." Wyatt's expression remained neutral, though there was a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Wasn't making any, but if you're looking for honest work, Thompson's ranch where I work needs help in the kitchen. The cook just up and left last week." Delilah studied him closely, searching for deception. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." "I know what it's like to be hungry," he replied evenly. "And Mrs. Thompson is a fair woman. She'd pay you proper wages." "I can cook," Delilah admitted cautiously, "but I have nothing to offer as references. Let the food do the talking. I'm heading back there now if you want to come along. Or you can find me at the saloon later if you change your mind." He gestured toward the dusty road leading out of town. Delilah clutched her precious bundle of food, considering her options, which were painfully few. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford, not when her stomach was clawing itself with hunger. "I'll come," she decided, her voice barely audible, "but I'll work for my keep and I'll pay you back for this." She indicated the bread and cheese. Wyatt nodded, a slight smile touching his lips. "I don't doubt it for a second, madam." They walked to the livery where Wyatt's horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding, was stabled. Delilah hung back, watching as he exchanged words with the stable hand and saddled his horse. "Have you ridden before?" he asked, leading the horse out. "Yes, but it's been some time." Wyatt helped her mount first, then swung up behind her. Delilah sat stiffly, uncomfortable with the proximity to a stranger, but too practical to refuse the ride. "Thompson's ranch is about an hour's ride," Wyatt explained as they left town, the buildings giving way to open rangeland. "It's not the biggest spread around, but it's good land with good people." As they rode, Delilah gradually relaxed, her hunger temporarily satiated after eating some of the bread. The mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks still capped with snow despite the summer heat. "What brings you to Silvercreek?" Wyatt asked after they'd been riding in silence for a while. Delilah hesitated. "I was working for a family in Denver as a maid, the household. It didn't work out." Wyatt didn't press for details, sensing there was more to the story than she was willing to share. "Silvercreek's a decent town, small but growing since the silver strike last year." "And you? Have you been here long?" "6 months. Before that, I was driving cattle up from Texas. Decided I was tired of sleeping on the ground and eating trail dust." A small smile touched Delilah's lips. "I can understand that." The Thompson ranch came into view as they crested a hill, a sprawling main house with several outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse. Cattle dotted the surrounding pastures, and smoke curled from the main house's chimney. "That's it," Wyatt said, pointing. "Home sweet home, at least for now." Martha Thompson was a formidable woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. She listened to Wyatt's explanation about finding a potential cook with a mixture of skepticism and interest. "Can you make biscuits, girl?" she asked Delilah directly. "Yes, madam, and bread, stews, pies, whatever you need." Martha looked her up and down. "You're thin as a rail, not much meat on those bones for hard work." "I'm stronger than I look," Delilah replied, standing straighter, "and I learn quick." Martha's expression softened slightly. "We'll try you out for a week. Meals for the ranch hands, breakfast and dinner. Bunkhouse is no place for a woman, so you'll sleep in the small room off the kitchen. Wyatt says you just arrived in town." "Yes, madam." "Got any belongings?" Delilah shook her head, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Just what I'm wearing." Martha sighed. "I'll find you some things to tide you over. Can't have my cook looking like she's been dragged through a briar patch." She turned to Wyatt. "Show her the kitchen and where she'll be staying." "I expect you back to work after that, Daniels. Those fence posts won't set themselves." "Yes, madam," Wyatt replied with a respectful nod. The kitchen was spacious with a large cast iron stove, wooden work tables, and well-stocked shelves. A small bedroom adjoined it, simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window overlooking the yard. "It's not much," Wyatt said, leaning against the doorframe as Delilah took in her new quarters. "It's perfect," she whispered, running her hand over the quilt on the bed. After weeks of uncertainty and nights spent in barns or on the hard ground, this small room seemed like a palace. "I'll leave you to get settled," he said. "Dinner's at 6 for the hands. There's about 15 men working here currently, plus Mr. and Mrs. Thompson." "Thank you," Delilah said, turning to face him. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you for your kindness." Wyatt shrugged, suddenly awkward under her earnest gaze. "Just doing what anyone would do." "No," she said softly, "not anyone." He tipped his hat and left her there, the memory of her grateful smile following him as he headed back to his work. Delilah proved to be an excellent cook. By the end of her first week, the ranch hands were singing her praises, especially after months of the previous cook's bland, sometimes burned offerings. She rose before dawn each day to start breakfast biscuits, gravy, eggs, bacon, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Dinner was hearty stews, roasts, or fried chicken with all the fixings. Wyatt found himself lingering at meals, watching Delilah as she moved around the kitchen with growing confidence. The regular meals had begun to fill out her thin frame, and the haunted look in her eyes was slowly fading. She was naturally reserved, speaking little except when spoken to, but he occasionally caught glimpses of a dry wit that suggested the woman she might have been before hardship found her. One evening, about a month after her arrival, Wyatt stayed behind after the other hands had left the dining room. Delilah was kneading dough for the next morning's bread, her sleeves rolled up to reveal slender forearms dusted with flour. "Need any help?" he offered, gathering some of the dirty plates. She looked up, surprised. "That's not your job." "Neither is it yours to cook alone for all these men, but here we are," he replied with a smile. "Thought maybe your hands could use a rest." Delilah hesitated, then nodded. "You could bring in more wood for the stove if you don't mind. I'll need it hot early tomorrow." Wyatt collected an armload of firewood from the stack outside and filled the box beside the stove. When he returned from his second trip, Delilah had set aside the dough to rise and was wiping down the table. "How are you settling in?" he asked, taking a seat at the clean end of the table. "Well enough," she replied. "Mrs. Thompson is fair, like you said. The work is hard but honest." "And the men? They treating you proper?" A small smile touched her lips. "They know better than to cross Mrs. Thompson or you, apparently. Mr. Peterson mentioned that you had a conversation with some of the newer hands about appropriate behavior around me." Wyatt rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "Just making sure everyone understands the rules of civilized behavior." "Thank you," she said simply, sitting down across from him. In the lamplight, her auburn hair gleamed with copper highlights, and he noticed a spray of freckles across her nose that he hadn't seen before. "I've been meaning to ask," he said after a moment. "What brought you all the way from Denver on your own? It's not an easy journey for a woman alone." Delilah's fingers twisted the cloth she was holding. "I told you I worked for a family there." "You did." "The master of the house. He developed an interest in me that his wife didn't appreciate." Her voice was carefully neutral, but Wyatt could hear the undercurrent of pain. "When I refused his advances, he accused me of stealing a silver brooch. No one believed me over him, of course. I was dismissed without references and nearly arrested." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry that happened to you. It's the way of the world," she said with a small shrug. "I left before they could throw me in jail, took what little savings I had and headed west. I thought maybe in a new place I could start fresh where no one knew me." "And then I caught you stealing bread," Wyatt said softly. Delilah looked down, shame coloring her cheeks. "My money ran out sooner than expected. The stage was delayed by a broken wheel and I had to spend extra nights at way stations. By the time I reached Silvercreek, I hadn't eaten in days." "You don't need to explain," Wyatt assured her. "Anyone would have done the same in your position." She looked up at him then, her green eyes serious. "Not everyone would have done what you did, though. Most would have let me face the consequences." "I'm not most people," he replied with a half smile. "No," she agreed softly. "You're not." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the stove and the distant sounds of the ranch settling for the night. "I should let you get some rest," Wyatt said finally, standing up. "Dawn comes early around here." "That it does," she agreed, rising as well. "Good night, Wyatt, and thank you for the wood." "Anytime, Delilah," he replied, tipping his hat before heading out into the night. As autumn approached, turning the aspen groves to gold against the mountainsides, Wyatt found himself creating more and more excuses to spend time in the kitchen. Sometimes he'd bring Delilah wildflowers he'd found while riding the range, or a particularly sweet apple from the small orchard behind the main house. In return, she'd set aside the crispiest piece of bacon for his breakfast, or bake his favorite peach cobbler when the fruit was in season. The other ranch hands noticed, of course. Good-natured teasing followed Wyatt whenever he volunteered to help carry supplies from town to the kitchen, or stayed behind to keep the cook company while she cleaned up. "You sweet on our Miss Morgan, Daniels," drawled Tom Peterson, the oldest of the hands, one evening as they sat on the bunkhouse porch. Wyatt took a long drag on his cigarette before answering. "She's a fine woman who deserves respect." "Didn't answer my question," Tom chuckled, "but that's answer enough, I reckon." Wyatt didn't deny it. The truth was, Delilah Morgan had worked her way under his skin in a way no woman ever had before. It wasn't just her beauty, though he admired the way the sun caught the red in her hair, or how her eyes crinkled at the corners when she really smiled. It was her quiet strength, her determination to stand on her own 2 feet despite everything life had thrown at her. The Thompsons were hosting their annual harvest dance in mid-October, a tradition that brought together ranchers, townspeople, and workers from the surrounding area. Martha Thompson insisted that Delilah attend rather than work, even going so far as to lend her a dress for the occasion, a simple but pretty blue calico that complemented her coloring. Wyatt nearly dropped his punch cup when he saw her enter the barn that had been cleared and decorated for the dance. Her hair was loosely pinned up, with soft curls framing her face, and the dress highlighted curves that her usual work clothes concealed. She looked nervous, hovering near the entrance as if considering an escape. Before he could cross to her, young Charlie Wilson from the neighboring ranch approached her with a confident grin, clearly asking her to dance. Wyatt felt a stab of something uncomfortably close to jealousy as Delilah hesitantly accepted and allowed herself to be led onto the floor. "You're staring, son," came Mrs. Thompson's amused voice from beside him. Wyatt startled slightly. "Just making sure she's comfortable, madam." First social event and all, Martha gave him a knowing look. "She's blossomed these past few months. You had something to do with that, I suspect." "She's a strong woman," Wyatt replied. "She just needed a chance." "And you gave her that," Martha nodded. "You know, Mr. Thompson and I have been talking. We're getting on in years, and this place is too big for just the 2 of us to manage. We've been thinking about taking on a partner, someone who knows the ranch and has a stake in its future." Wyatt tore his gaze from Delilah to look at his employer. "Madam, just something to consider," Martha patted his arm. "Now, are you going to stand here all night, or are you going to ask that girl to dance before young Wilson stakes a permanent claim?" Wyatt didn't need further encouragement. He set down his cup and made his way across the floor, waiting for the current song to end before approaching. "Miss Morgan," he said with a slight bow, "would you honor me with the next dance?" Delilah's face lit up in a way that made his heart skip. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Daniels. Though I should warn you, I'm not very practiced." "That makes 2 of us," he admitted with a grin, taking her hand as the musicians struck up a waltz. He placed his hand lightly at her waist, feeling the warmth of her through the fabric of her dress. They moved somewhat awkwardly at first, finding their rhythm, but soon were gliding smoothly around the floor. "You clean up nice, Cowboy," Delilah said with unusual boldness, a flush coloring her cheeks. Wyatt had indeed made an effort, wearing his best shirt and the vest his mother had sent him last Christmas. "Not half as nice as you," That's a becoming color on you. Mrs. Thompson's dress, she explained. She insisted I wear it instead of my regular clothes. Remind me to thank her, Wyatt replied, guiding her through a turn. Are you enjoying yourself? More than I expected to, Delilah admitted. It's been a long time since I've attended any social gathering. The men will be lining up to dance with you all night, Wyatt said, unable to keep a hint of possessiveness from his voice. Delilah's eyes met his, something unspoken passing between them. I don't mind if there's only one particular cowboy on my dance card. Wyatt's heart hammered in his chest. Is that so? It is, she confirmed softly. They danced 3 more dances together before propriety demanded they separate for a while. Wyatt watched from the sidelines as Delilah danced with Mr. Thompson, and then Tom Peterson, her laughter carrying across the barn when Tom told one of his infamous stories. Later, as the night cooled and stars appeared in the clear sky, Wyatt found Delilah outside, breathing in the crisp autumn air. Too warm in there, he asked, coming to stand beside her. A bit, she nodded. I'm not used to so many people in one place anymore. Wyatt offered his jacket, which she accepted with a grateful smile, wrapping it around her shoulders. They stood in companionable silence, looking out at the silhouettes of mountains against the night sky. Mrs. Thompson mentioned they're considering taking on a partner for the ranch, Wyatt said after a while. She told me the same, Delilah replied. She thinks you'd be perfect for it. Wyatt turned to look at her, surprised. She discussed it with you? Delilah nodded, her expression unreadable in the dim light. She asked what I thought about it, about you staying on permanently. And what did you say? He asked, his mouth suddenly dry. I said that you were a good man who works harder than anyone I've ever known, she answered honestly. That the Thompsons would be fortunate to have you as a partner. Wyatt stepped closer, drawn by something in her voice. And what about you, Delilah? Would you be fortunate to have me stay on permanently? Her breath caught audibly. What are you asking me, Wyatt? He took her hand, his calloused fingers enveloping her smaller ones. I'm asking if there might be a chance for us for something more than friendship. Because I find myself thinking about you more often than is probably proper, and if my feelings aren't returned, I should know now before I make a fool of myself. Delilah was silent for so long that Wyatt began to regret his forthrightness. But then she squeezed his hand, her voice barely above a whisper when she finally spoke. When you found me that day in the market, I was at my lowest point. I'd given up on the idea that good people still existed in this world. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. You changed that for me, Wyatt. You showed me kindness when I least expected it and asked nothing in return. That's not an answer, he said gently. A small smile curved her lips. Yes, there might be a chance for something more. A very good chance, in fact. Joy surged through him, and he raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. May I court you properly then, Miss Morgan? I'd like that very much, Mr. Daniels, she replied, her smile widening. The music from the barn drifted to them on the night breeze, a slow, sweet melody. Without asking, Wyatt drew her into his arms, and they swayed together under the stars, the beginning of something precious taking root between them. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow by mid-November. The pace of work slowed as it always did in the cold months, with fewer hands needed to manage the reduced winter operations. Wyatt spent the extra time helping Mr. Thompson with plans for spring improvements and learning the business side of running a ranch. The partnership discussions had become more concrete, with papers drawn up by the lawyer in town. His courtship of Delilah progressed with the deliberate pace that suited them both. Sunday afternoons were reserved for them alone. Sometimes, They'd ride to a nearby spot with a picnic basket when weather permitted. Other times they'd sit by the fire in the main house parlor, reading or simply talking while Martha pretended not to notice the way they looked at each other. As Christmas approached, Wyatt found himself facing a dilemma. He wanted to give Delilah something special, something that would show her how much she had come to mean to him in the months since that fateful day at the market. But what could he offer that would truly convey his feelings? The answer came to him on a supply run to Silvercreek. In the window of the jeweler's shop sat a delicate silver locket, simple but beautifully crafted. It wasn't an engagement ring that would come later, he hoped, but it was a promise, a token of his growing love for her. Christmas Eve at the Thompson ranch was a festive affair. The main house was decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, and Delilah had outdone herself with the feast roast turkey, ham, potatoes, cranberry sauce, and 3 different kinds of pie. The remaining ranch hands, those without family nearby, joined the Thompsons, Wyatt, and Delilah for the celebration. After dinner and carols around the piano, Mr. Thompson produced a bottle of fine brandy, and gifts were exchanged. Delilah received a new shawl from the Thompsons and various small tokens from the hands who had come to respect and admire their cook. When it came time for Wyatt's gift, he felt uncharacteristically nervous. "This is for you," he said softly, handing her the small wrapped package as they sat slightly apart from the others. Delilah carefully unwrapped it, her eyes widening as she opened the box to reveal the silver locket. "Oh, Wyatt, it's beautiful. Open it," he encouraged. Inside, he had placed a tiny pressed wildflower, the same kind as the first ones he had brought her from the range. On the opposite side was an inscription, "For DM, who stole more than bread that day." Tears welled in her eyes as she read it. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he assured her, taking the locket from her trembling fingers and gently fastening it around her neck. "I just wanted you to have something to remind you that sometimes the most unexpected meetings can change a life forever." "I have something for you too," she said, reaching into her pocket. "It's not as fine as this, but," she handed him a small package. Inside was a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue wool, incredibly soft to the touch. "I've been working on it at night," she explained shyly. "Mrs. Thompson taught me how." Wyatt wrapped it around his neck immediately, the warmth of both the wool and the sentiment behind it enveloping him. "It's perfect," he said sincerely. "Thank you." Later, as the celebration wound down and people began to retire for the night, Wyatt walked Delilah to her room off the kitchen. Snowflakes drifted past the windows, adding to the magical quality of the evening. "I have something else I want to tell you," Wyatt said as they reached her door. "I signed the partnership papers with the Thompsons yesterday. It's official, I'm staying." Delilah's face lit up with genuine happiness. "That's wonderful news, Wyatt. I'm so pleased for you. You've earned it." "I have plans for this place," he continued, taking her hands in his. "There's the south pasture that could be expanded, and the old cabin by the creek that could be fixed up real nice for a family someday." Delilah's breath caught as his meaning became clear. "A family? I'm not proposing tonight," he clarified quickly. "Not properly. When I do that, I'll have a ring and I'll do it right. But I wanted you to know that's where my thoughts are heading, that I'm building something here, and I hope you'll be part of it." Tears shimmered in Delilah's eyes again, but she was smiling. "You've given me so much already, Wyatt. A chance when I needed one most. Kindness when I'd forgotten what it felt like. A place to belong. You've given me just as much," he insisted. "You've given me a reason to put down roots, to build something lasting." She reached up, her palm warm against his cheek. "I never expected to find someone like you, not after everything. I'd convinced myself that kind of happiness wasn't meant for me. And now," he asked, covering her hand with his own. "Now I'm beginning to believe in possibilities again," she whispered. Wyatt leaned down, hesitating just a breath away from her lips. "May I?" Her answer was to close the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that held all the promise of their future sweet, tender, and filled with hope. As spring returned to the Colorado high country, the Thompson ranch burst into new life. Calving season brought long days and nights of watchful care. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and the creek ran high with snowmelt from the mountains. Delilah's garden behind the kitchen flourished under her attentive care, promising fresh vegetables for the summer months ahead. Wyatt had made good on his promise to restore the old cabin by the creek. What had once been little more than a hunter's shelter was now a proper two-room home with a stone fireplace, sturdy roof, and windows that caught the morning sun. He worked on it whenever he could spare time from his expanding responsibilities as partner in the ranch. His courtship of Delilah had deepened through the winter months into something neither of them could imagine living without. They had grown to know each other's stories, his childhood in Texas with 5 siblings, the mother who taught him respect for women, the father who showed him the meaning of hard work before passing when Wyatt was 16. She told him of her own family in Missouri, lost to a fever when she was 18, forcing her to make her own way in the world. On a perfect May evening, with the sun painting the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, Wyatt asked Delilah to ride with him to see the progress on the cabin. He had a special surprise in mind. "My goodness," Delilah exclaimed as they approached the cabin. "Wyatt, it's transformed completely." The cabin now boasted a small covered porch with a swing, window boxes ready for flowers, and a neat stone path leading to the door. Inside, he had furnished it simply but comfortably: a table and chairs, a cast-iron stove, a bedstead with a new mattress, and shelves for books and keepsakes. But what caught Delilah's attention immediately was the small table in the center of the main room, set for a romantic dinner with candles and wildflowers in a mason jar. "What's all this?" she asked, turning to him with wondering eyes. "I thought we might have dinner here tonight," Wyatt explained, suddenly nervous despite all his planning. "Mrs. Thompson helped with the food. It's keeping warm in the oven." "It's lovely," Delilah breathed, taking in every detail. She fingered the locket she always wore, a habit she'd developed when moved by emotion. They shared the meal: roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh greens from Delilah's garden by candlelight, talking easily about their day and plans for the summer ahead. When they'd finished, Wyatt reached across the table to take her hand. "Delilah, do you remember that day in the market when we first met?" She smiled fondly. "How could I forget? You saved me from certain arrest, possibly worse." "I saw something in you that day," he continued, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "A dignity despite your circumstances, a pride that wouldn't let you beg even when you were desperate." "I was hardly at my best," she said softly. "You were exactly who you needed to be to survive," he countered. "And in the months since, I've seen every aspect of that strength grow and flourish. You've built a place for yourself here through hard work and determination. You've become indispensable not just to the ranch, but to everyone who knows you." He stood, still holding her hand, and drew her to her feet. "Especially to me." Delilah's eyes widened as Wyatt reached into his pocket and lowered himself to one knee before her. "I promised I'd do this properly when the time came," he said, his voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. He opened his hand to reveal a ring, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond that caught the candlelight. "Delilah Morgan, I love you more than I ever thought possible. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks as she nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Wyatt. Yes, I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and gathered her in his arms, sealing their promise with a kiss that held all the passion and tenderness of his love for her. "When?" she asked breathlessly when they finally parted. "As soon as you'd like," he replied. "The cabin will be ready whenever we are, or we can wait until fall after the busy season if you prefer." "June," she decided, surprising herself with her certainty. "The garden will be in bloom and the weather will be perfect." Wyatt's smile was radiant. "June it is, then." They were married on the first Saturday in June 1877, beneath an arch of wildflowers and greenery that the ranch hands had constructed by the creek. The entire community turned out for the occasion: the Thompsons, all the ranch employees, townspeople from Silvercreek who had come to know and respect them both, and even a few of Wyatt's old trail companions who had ridden in for the celebration. Delilah wore a dress of ivory satin that Martha Thompson had ordered specially from Denver, with her auburn hair crowned by a wreath of fresh flowers. Wyatt could scarcely believe his eyes when she appeared on Mr. Thompson's arm, walking toward him through the meadow grass. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, with vows they had written themselves. Delilah promised to stand by Wyatt through all of life's seasons, to be his partner in all things, and to never forget the blessing of having found him. Wyatt vowed to honor and cherish her always, to build a life worthy of her trust in him, and to remember each day the miracle of their chance meeting. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with feasting, dancing, and toasts to the happy couple. As twilight deepened and stars began to appear, Wyatt and Delilah slipped away to the cabin that was now their home, leaving their friends to continue the festivities. Inside, Wyatt lifted Delilah across the threshold, both of them laughing as he nearly stumbled in the darkness. Candles had been lit earlier by thoughtful friends, bathing the cabin in a warm glow. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, and the bed covers had been turned down invitingly. "Welcome home, Mrs. Daniels," Wyatt said softly, setting her on her feet but keeping his arms around her waist. "I like the sound of that," Delilah replied, reaching up to loosen his tie. "I never dreamed I'd have a name I was proud to bear, or a man I'd be proud to share it with. I never dreamed I'd find everything I wanted in a woman stealing bread." He teased gently, helping her remove the pins from her hair until it fell in waves down her back. Their first night as husband and wife was everything they had hoped for: tender, passionate, and filled with the wonder of newfound intimacy. As they lay together afterward, Delilah's head resting on Wyatt's chest, he stroked her hair and marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "I was thinking," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead, "about how different our lives might have been if I hadn't been in town that day, or if I'd looked the other way. Or if I hadn't been desperate enough to steal," Delilah added. "It seems our worst moments led us to our best." "Life has a way of working out sometimes," Wyatt agreed. "Though I'd prefer if all our future blessings come without quite so much hardship first." Delilah laughed softly. "I think we've earned some smooth sailing for a while. The years that followed proved her right." The Thompson Ranch, eventually renamed the Thompson and Daniels Ranch, as the older couple gradually handed over more responsibility to Wyatt, prospered under his management. The cabin by the creek expanded as their family grew, first with the addition of a son, James, born in the spring of 1878, and then twin daughters, Elizabeth and Sarah, who arrived in the summer of 1880. Delilah continued to oversee the ranch's kitchen, training a series of young women to assist her as the operation expanded. Her garden became famous throughout the county, supplying not only the ranch but also the general store in Silvercreek with fresh produce and preserves that bore the Thompson and Daniels label. By 1885, the ranch had nearly doubled in size, with the addition of neighboring properties as they became available. Wyatt's innovative breeding program improved their stock, and his fair dealing with both customers and employees earned him respect throughout the territory. That autumn, as they celebrated their 8th wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner in their now comfortable home, Wyatt presented Delilah with a small box. "What's this?" she asked, setting aside her dessert plate. At 31, Delilah had matured into a striking woman, her figure fuller after 3 children, her auburn hair now adorned with an occasional strand of silver. "Open it and see," Wyatt encouraged, his blue eyes still capable of making her heart skip even after years of marriage. Inside the box was a silver charm to add to the locket she still wore faithfully, a tiny loaf of bread, exquisitely detailed. Delilah laughed in delight. "Oh, Wyatt, it's perfect. I thought it was time we had a proper reminder of how our story began," he explained, helping her attach it to the chain alongside the locket. "Something to tell the children when they are older." "Speaking of children," Delilah said, her eyes twinkling with a secret, "we may need another charm before too long." Wyatt's expression shifted from confusion to joyful understanding. "You're sure?" she nodded, taking his hand and placing it over her still flat stomach. "Dr. Morgan confirmed it yesterday. Spring of next year, we'll have another little Daniels to love." Wyatt gathered her into his arms, his joy too great for words. Their 4th child, Robert, was born in April 1886, completing their family. Life was not without its challenges. A severe drought in 87 threatened their herds. 7-year-old James broke his arm falling from a horse, and the twins went through a phase of mischief, making that tested even Delilah's patient nature. But through it all, the foundation of love and respect that had begun with that simple act of kindness in the Silvercreek market never wavered. In 1901, 25 years after their first meeting, Wyatt and Delilah hosted a grand celebration at the ranch, which had grown into one of the most successful operations in Colorado. The Thompsons, now in their 80s but still sharp of mind, were guests of honor, along with family and friends from near and far. James, at 23, had recently returned from college in Denver to take his place in the family business, bringing with him a fiancée who reminded Wyatt very much of a young Delilah. The twins, 21 and as different in personality as they were identical in appearance, had pursued their own paths, Elizabeth as a teacher in the Silvercreek school, and Sarah as a talented seamstress with dreams of opening her own shop in town. 15-year-old Robert showed all the signs of following in his father's footsteps, with a natural affinity for the land and the livestock. As twilight fell and lanterns were lit around the property, Wyatt drew Delilah away from their guests to the old creek that had witnessed so much of their life together. The original cabin, though long since expanded, still stood at its heart, a testament to their beginnings. 25 years, Wyatt marveled, his arm around his wife's waist. At 51, he had lost none of his strength, though his dark hair was now liberally streaked with gray. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it." "The best 25 years any woman could ask for," Delilah replied, leaning into his embrace. She reached up to touch the locket and bread charm she still wore every day. "From the moment you told me to take more, I've been taking more of everything good in life, more love, more joy, more blessings than I ever thought possible." Wyatt turned her to face him, his blue eyes as clear and honest as the day they met. "And I've received more than I could have imagined in return. You gave my life purpose, Delilah. You gave me a family to love and a legacy to build. We built it together, she corrected gently, every step of the way. In the distance, they could hear the laughter and music from their anniversary celebration, the sounds of the life they had created together. Their children's voices called for them, eager to begin the dancing. "Shall we?" Wyatt asked, offering his arm with the same gallant gesture he had used at their first harvest dance so many years ago. "Always," Delilah replied, taking his arm with a smile that still made his heart race. And as they walked back toward the lights and the music, toward the family and future they had forged from that one moment of kindness in a dusty market square, both knew with absolute certainty that the greatest theft ever committed was when a desperate young woman had unwittingly stolen a cowboy's heart with nothing more than her dignity in the face of desperation. It was a theft for which they would both be forever grateful.